Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're jumping into this amazing story. It's about a couple of 9-year-old kids, a really frustrating job, and this one single lesson that completely changes how you think about getting rich. And, it all kicks off with one simple but super important question.
So imagine this. You're 9 years old and you ask your dad, Dad, can you tell me how to get rich? And this wasn't just out of the blue. He'd just been totally left out by his rich friends. They basically told him he couldn't hang out at their beach house because he was a poor kid. Ouch, that's gotta sting. And you know that feeling? This is back in 1956. That feeling of being on the outside looking in. That's what lit the fire. It kicked off this huge desire to figure out money, once and for all. It was a mission that honestly would shape his entire life. Okay, so what does he do? He goes and teams up with his best friend, Mike, who was pretty much in the exact same situation. They were totally determined to figure out how to make some cash. And their first business idea, well, let's just say it was very creative. I mean, their plan was kind of genius, even if it was a little off. First step, they went around the neighborhood collecting old lead toothpaste tubes. Okay, then they'd melt them all down over a little hibachi grill. And from there, they'd pour the melted lead into these plaster of Paris molds to make, you guessed it, perfect lead nickels. They were literally making money. Yeah, as you can probably guess, their little money-making operation didn't last long. The boys' dad came home, saw what was happening, and had to shut it down. He gently explained to them that what they were doing actually had a name for it: counterfeiting. And yeah, that's super illegal. So their first business venture was dead on arrival. So they're feeling pretty bummed out, right? But then they get a new piece of advice. The dad says, look, if you really want to learn about money, you gotta go talk to Mike's dad. Now this guy, he'd later be known as Rich Dad. He was quietly building a business empire. And he actually agrees to teach them. But his methods, well, they were a little different. So here's the deal he offers them. It's simple. I'll teach you what you want to know, but you have to come work for me. 3 hours every single Saturday, and I'll pay you 10 cents an hour. 10 cents! I mean, even for 1956, that was basically nothing. It was an insult. But they were so desperate to learn, they took the deal. So for the next 3 weeks, they do the most boring work imaginable. Just dusting thousands and thousands of canned goods in one of Rich Dad's stores. And they never even see the guy. All that work for a measly 30 cents, which could barely get them a comic book. The boy just snapped. He'd had it. He felt totally exploited and decided he was going to confront his new mentor. But here's where it gets interesting. He marches in, demands a raise, and basically calls Rich Dad a cheap crook. And the answer he gets is not what he expected at all. Rich Dad calmly explains that all that frustration, that anger, that feeling of being underpaid, that was the lesson. He was letting them feel what real life feels like for most people. Okay, so now that he had the boys' full attention, Rich Dad was ready to pull back the curtain. He started explaining these invisible forces that keep most people stuck in a cycle of financial struggle. And he was about to introduce them to a concept that would stick with them forever. He called it the rat race. And it's this pattern, right? It's driven by two really powerful emotions. First, there's fear. The fear of not having money. That's what pushes you to get a job in the first place. But then, as soon as you get that paycheck, another emotion takes over. Greed, or maybe just desire. And you start dreaming about all the cool stuff you can finally buy. And this really shows you the whole cycle. You drag yourself to work Monday to Friday, mostly because you're scared of being broke. Then Friday comes, you get that paycheck, and suddenly desire takes over. You pay your bills, maybe you treat yourself to something nice, and before you know it, the money's gone and the whole thing starts over again. It's a treadmill you can get trapped on for your whole life.
And this is the big aha moment, right? It's all about a totally different way of thinking. See, most people, the poor and the middle class, are taught to work for money. You trade your hours for dollars. Simple. But the rich, they learn how to make their money work for them. So the million-dollar question becomes, how in the world do you actually do that?
Well, Rich Dad's next lesson was even crazier. He looks at these two 9-year-olds and says, okay, time to get back to work. But this time, I'm not paying you anything. Zero. His whole goal was to get them to break that emotional tie to getting a paycheck. But first, he had to test them. So after they'd been working for free for a few more weeks, he dangles the bait. He offers them a raise, their first emotional trigger. How about 25 cents an hour, he says. Come on, doesn't that make your heart beat just a little bit faster? Somehow, the boys managed to resist. So Rich Dad turns up the heat. Okay, fine, $1 an hour. Now, you have to remember, for a 9-year-old kid back then, that was a ton of money. You could just feel the desire building. They're thinking about new bikes, new baseball gloves, the whole shebang. And then he hits them with the final, absolutely insane offer. $5 an hour. The number was so ridiculous, so over the top for 1956, that it just broke the spell. The temptation just evaporated, and this calm washed over them. And just like that, they had passed his test. And this is really the heart of the whole lesson. Once they learned to control those powerful emotions, the fear and the desire, they weren't just reacting anymore. They could actually take a step back, quiet all that noise in their head, and think. Their minds were finally free to spot opportunities that everyone else, blinded by their need for a paycheck, was completely missing. So now that their brains were wired to look for opportunities instead of just waiting for payday, it really didn't take long for them to find one. And it was sitting right there, right under their noses the whole time. This was the big puzzle they had to figure out, right? How do you make money when you're working for free? With no paycheck to count on, they were forced to get creative, to use their imagination. They had to find a way to create value out of thin air, just from what was around them. And then one day, they saw it. They noticed the store manager, Mrs. Martin, doing something weird. She was tearing the front covers off old comic books. She'd send those back to the distributor for credit. And the rest of the comic book? She just tossed it in the trash. So the boys went and asked the distributor if they could just have the old coverless comics, and he said sure, just as long as they didn't try to resell them. And just like that, they got their hands on an asset for free that everybody else was literally throwing away. So what did they do? They opened up a comic book library down in Mike's basement. They charged the neighborhood kids 10 cents admission, and for that, you could come in and read as many comics as you wanted for 2 hours. And the business blew up. Over 3 months, they were averaging $9.50 a week in pure profit. That was money that was now working for them, even when they weren't there. And that's how they did it. Through this series of really weird but incredibly powerful lessons, they finally learned the #1 rule of getting wealthy. It's not about how much your paycheck is. It's about a total mind shift. The rich don't work for money. They figure out how to make money work for them. And so that really brings us to the big question for all of us, right? Take a look at your own life. Is it being run by your paycheck? Or have you found a way to start making money work for you? Are you on the lookout for those comic books, those opportunities that everyone else is just throwing away? Because thinking about that, well, that answer could change everything for you.